Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Call, and I will be your host today, as I am for most of these webinars. And it is a pleasure and an honor to do this each and every week and bring you these webinars and these great bits of information, these great guests, all of those type of things. I want to introduce our speaker today. Mark Edwards is the managing director of Creditsafe USA and a registered global credit professional with a history in business information. He has years of experience in portfolio management, credit and risk solutions, and business development. In a former life, Mark was a rugby player and a boxer, and now enjoys getting outside with his young pup, Winston. So if you've been on any of these webinars before, you know Mark, you've seen Mark around, and it's always a pleasure to have you on with me, Mark. So welcome.
Thank you, Nathan, for the introduction.
And I see you got the memo of the vest and tie company policy apparently. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, speaking of today, Mark and I get on ahead of time, or I get on with all of our speakers ahead of time, and we discuss what's going to happen, kind of the audio and visual stuff and everything. And Mark and I were talking, and we had a plan for what we were going to do and how this was going to go. And we kind of flipped it on its head a little bit here in the last couple of minutes before you saw that title slide come up. And I would like to ask all of you in the audience a question. And it's kind of a bigger open-ended question that's a bit thought-provoking. And I would like for you to answer it at any point during the webinar. And the way you're going to do that is that Q&A section. Just type it in there and just say something to the effect of, this is my answer to the question, or what have you, so I know what I'm looking at, if you would, please. And then we're going to talk about those at the end here. We're going to give you plenty of time to answer it. But the question is, what questions do you want to or wish you could answer with a credit report? What are those things that you wish you could answer by way of a credit report? So again, I know it's kind of a bigger question. We're gonna go through this of the stuff that we have, the topic we have on hand today. But if you could answer that for us, it would be essential to us to know that, to inform this discussion, just to help us as a company as we go forward, and just really add to the discussion today. So speaking of that, Mark, we're talking about credit reports and specifically Creditsafe credit reports. Let's just kind of give an overview here. What is a business credit report?
Thank you, Nathan. So yes, we'll look at a report or two reports during the course of this discussion, and just wanted to sort of echo what you're saying. I thought it was a really interesting question, how people are using credit data within their business. So I'm fascinated to hear the responses there. But to answer your question, what is a credit report? So a business credit report is an essential tool for banks, lenders, credit grantors, suppliers, in assessing the credit worthiness of a company they intend to do business with. The information in a report contains crucial data needed to make all sorts of decisions. A business credit report is designed to predict the company's ability to meet its contractual obligations based on payment history, public records, and other aggregated information. Creditsafe and the other agencies collect data on millions of companies globally. They combine that data into a credit report and then predict or create a credit score or credit rating. So that's the assessment of what is a credit report.
Okay, so if that's what we've got, where does this come from? What information is used to kind of create this report and to kind of build this out?
So there's several sections to a report. You have the company identifying information, or summary, we call them firmographic information. And this information is designed to tell you who the company is. So legal name, doing business as name, location and corporate address, business indicator, whether they're active or inactive, phone and website, registration numbers, industry codes, number of employees, incorporation date, and legal form. So basically, you're trying to get a sense of who is this company. The identity data is sourced from multiple sources, including and not limited to, particularly in the US, the registry, which is the Secretary of State, firmographic data providers, marketing data providers, trade payment data providers, and lots of other sources that we take that information and build what we call the backbone of the data. Then you have the risk ratings and scores, and we'll dive into that during the demonstration. But essentially, we're going to give an idea of how well we think this company is, how creditworthy the company is. Depending on the region, we have then audited financials. So these will include profit before tax, tangible net worth, et cetera, et cetera. The source for public companies, again in the US, is the registry, which is SEC. For non-profit tax-exempt companies, IRS forms 990 and 990 EZ. The fourth area of the report is linkage and ownership structure. So this gives you an idea of the corporate structure of that organization, including ultimate beneficiary owner. Our linkage and group structure data is sourced from, again, firmographic providers, local registrations, both domestic and international. So where's filed in an annual report, for example, filings, and then also as a result of manual research. So where you see on the news, company A has acquired company B, for example. Another section of the report then is legal filings. So legal filings will include tax liens, UCCs, bankruptcies. Bankruptcies being the most severe. We collect that data from the federal bankruptcy courts on the day that it happens. We then have suits, liens, and judgments. These are obtained from the local courts and recorded, and then the UCCs, which are filed at the Secretary of State. Another section of the report, or key section of the report, is people information. So this will include directors, officers, and shareholders. We get that information from local registry filings, manual research, and marketing files. And then the biggest, again, particularly for the US, is trade payment data, the biggest element of the report. And this is essentially how well is a company paying its suppliers. So Creditsafe and the other agencies all collect trade payment information. That is data that's collected from thousands of companies that share their accounts receivable with us. We collect that data, anonymize, standardize, and aggregate that data. And from that information, we can determine how well this company is paying its suppliers. And therefore, we can determine what is the credit risk of that particular company. So that is the main sources of the data.
Okay. And with all that being said, you've got all this information that's on there. There's all sorts of stuff that you were just mentioning. All this information is going on to one report. How do we go about reading that? I know you're gonna, show us an actual demo, but I mean, how do we do that? How do you go through step by step and get the key information out of there?
So Nathan, I've just started sharing my screen. I'm going to walk you through a credit report. It's probably worth noting that every company is different. The risk tolerance is different in all of the countries. In every single company. So this isn't necessarily meant to be advice on this is how you do credit. It's more to show you the high level features of a credit report. The high level features should really translate across all of the agencies. So, a credit score, whether it's D&B or Experian, should really sort of tell you the similar thing, although the methodologies would differ. For simplicity's sake, Creditsafe is a global provider of information, and just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to keep it US focused. If there are specific questions about different regions, I'll attempt to answer. And it's probably worth noting that the data availability can change depending on the company type, company size, and the geographical region. So just to start this section, I'm looking at a company, a public company, Microsoft Corporation. I'm pretty sure you guys would have heard of this company. So top left, we have the company name. And then top right, we have our safe number. It's a proprietary numbering system that's a unique number to that particular organization. Then we have the risk score. So our risk score predicts the likelihood of bankruptcy or severe delinquency in the next 12 months. It ranges from 0 to 100. 0 is the worst, 100 is the best. One of the things I really like about the Creditsafe system is everything is color coded. So I'm going to skip ahead and click on score and limits, and you will see how the numeric values break down into the risk bandings. So 0 is the worst, 100 is the best, 71 to 100 is very low risk, 1 to 20 is very high risk. We also have an international score. Now, this is a lookup. The rating methodology is specific to a country. So the rating methodology we use in the US might differ slightly to the rating methodology we use in Belgium, for example. But what we've tried to do is standardize this. So very low risk means the same in all of these countries. So I'm going to jump back. So we've covered risk score, we've covered international score. Then we have DBT. This is days beyond terms. This is a dollar weighted average of the number of days beyond the agreed invoice days it takes for a company to provide, to make payments. So again, this information is provided to us by companies that share accounts receivable. We collect thousands of files on a monthly basis, aggregate all of that data, and that tells us how well Microsoft pays its suppliers. We then have a suggested credit limit. This is how much credit you could give to one particular company and expect to be paid within agreed payment terms. We then have derogatory legal. This includes tax liens, UCCs, suits and judgments, and bankruptcy information, and then possible OFAC sanctions. OFAC sanctions is Office of Foreign Assets Control. There's various compliance regulations about making sure that you're not selling to companies that are on OFAC watch lists. So what you're looking for here is a yes or no.
So Mark, I just want to back up one thing here real quick. I had a couple of comments come in or questions come in about DBT. Yep. Is DBT in this regard, is this set at 30, like a net 30 terms, or is it based on the company, based on how is that factored in? So
it's not necessarily the payment term, it's days beyond terms. So whether you're invoicing on 30, 60 or 90-day terms, it's the number of days beyond that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. We had a few people asking that question, if it's just based on a 30 or not, in regards to that.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Then we have your payment trend. So whether their payment trend is improving or decreasing. And then we have the inquiries trend, whether they're going up or whether they're going down. So that is the sort of the highlight. And then we have the summary report. This includes information about who the company is. So company name, SOS, charter number, established date, the company type, public or private, industry description, federal tax ID. To the right of that, then the company address, phone number, website, whether it's a headquarters or location, and any other known corporate addresses. We also then have the ability to view this company on a map. I really like this feature. It's very simple, but very effective. So if a company approaches you and they want to do business, you can determine whether it's an actual business or whether they're operating from their mother's basement, for example, just by viewing them on a Google Maps. As we scroll down, we have the key financials. So we also then have an indicator between the financials, whether it's up or down. I really like this feature. And again, it's color coded. Green is good, red is bad. The charts we show in our reports, they're all interactive. So you can actually chop out what you don't want to see. So if we look at the revenue and how that's increased over the years, Microsoft seems to be doing pretty well. Then we have the
big surprise, right?
Then we have the score history. What we have here is how well this company's performed over the last 12 months. And again, it's interactive. So if you want to take out how well we want to view the target company, you can see that Microsoft has remained fairly steady over the course of the 12 months.
Hey, Mark, we did have a few more questions like come in all at once here.
Yep.
So let me ask them before we go too much further. If you go back up to the DBT and the credit limit, several questions around, you said it could vary. A lot of questions around, is that an average or is that how is that factored, and how do we know what the terms actually are?
So it's a dollar weighted average. And essentially, the higher the dollar value in the agent brackets, if I skip ahead, Nathan, to the way we display the trade payment information, we receive from, like I say, in this case, we've got 1,100 sources of trade payment information on this particular company, trade line. So a trade line is a unique credit agreement between company A and company B. And the information that is reported to us is what is current, the dollar value is current, what sits in 1 to 30 days. So now we're past due, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 plus. So current, the invoicing terms can vary, but as long as we're within the terms, we're good. Once we get beyond the terms, days beyond terms, then we start falling into the age brackets. And the higher the dollar value in the higher age brackets, the bigger the impact that's going to have on DBT. So if you've got, let's say 100% in 90 plus, your DBT is going to be plus 90. The higher the DBT, the lower the rating.
Right. So it doesn't mean 1 to 30 as in invoice dates. It's 1 to 30 days after invoice terms.
Yes. So the invoice terms for these 1,200 trade lines can vary. What we're actually looking at is which have gone beyond beyond their agreed terms.
Right. Okay. And I think that answers most of these questions in that regard. And then we had one other set of questions, and there's a lot of questions coming in, folks. So if I'm missing them as they come, I apologize. I will get to all of them. I'm reading them as they come. We had a lot of folks ask, several different folks actually ask about the suggested credit limit. Is that suggested total? And if so, how do they know what's already been lent out for that particular company? So should Microsoft, I believe, was 50 million there. Should any company be willing to do credit up to 50 million, or is that a total that Microsoft should have available to them of credit of all companies they work with?
I think overall, Microsoft's credit limit to all of its creditors is going to be far greater than 50 million. So this is how much we recommend you could give to Microsoft. Now, of course, some companies just don't have the capability to fund Microsoft $50 million of credit, but this is an estimate based on what we understand. It's a really interesting point. The suggested credit limit and suggested credit score that we have on our report. And I don't want to criticize our score. It's predictive in value and in nature, but this is a non-market specific generic score that's designed for the mass markets. Companies who are interested in custom scorecards, that is another service that Creditsafe offers, and we can do another webinar on that particular subject. So this is an off-the-shelf scoring system that's not necessarily calibrated to a target company, but could be with consultation. So to answer your question, Nathan, this is per your company. So how much we recommend you could give to Microsoft at any one time. Okay.
And then one other set of questions that's coming in
here. One more point on that, Nathan.
Oh yeah, please.
The credit limit, I made a point at the start to say every company's risk tolerance is different. This is just a suggested credit limit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then one other question that's kind of come in through this is, and I think you're going to talk about it. If you're going to, you can just say you're going to answer it when you do, on trade payment data on a lot of it is asking how many lines seems to be for a good company. How many should they expect to have? How many should be offered? Where are we getting this information? How often is it updated? Do you want to give just an overview of that, or are you going to talk about it when you get there?
So let me just quickly finish the summary, because
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Data is certainly the most important subject within a US credit report. So on the summary page, we talk about the group structure. So who is the ultimate parent? We have a total number of collections, the trade payment dashboard, and then at the very bottom of the page, the number of inquiries. So this is how many times Microsoft has been looked at in the last 12, 6, and 9 months. Now, this data is slightly skewed for Microsoft being one of the largest companies in the world, but it is fairly interesting if you're looking at small to medium-sized company. So I just wanted to finish that before I tackle your question, Nathan. So if we scroll back up to trade payment data. So I'll trade payment data is provided to us by both customers and non-customers. and it's the backbone of US credit information because of the availability of data. Private companies don't have to file financials. So it's very similar to what you see on your personal credit report. Your credit loans will, your credit cards and your loans will report to the bureaus and say, hey, he pays me on time or he doesn't pay me on time. And that's essentially what we're trying to do here. But we have thousands of contributors that share their accounts receivable with us. Typically, it's done on a monthly basis. However, there are companies that report on a weekly, and there are companies that are reported on a daily basis. This is a database that's constantly being updated. So this is being updated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Different companies report to us in different times. So for one company that closes their month end on the 31st of the month, they'll report to us on the 1st of the month. Some companies might finish on the 10th and they'll report to us on the 11th. So, and then there are those companies that report on a weekly or daily basis. I think I covered most of your question on that. Just
I believe so, but I'm sure with as many that are coming through, that I'll get some more if that's the question.
I think another part of the question was how many trade lines should a company have? Yes. And that's a really good question. So Microsoft, we've got 1,200 trade lines. So 1,200 different credit agreements between Microsoft and its suppliers. Now, as we go down, like I say, Microsoft, one of the largest companies in the world, as we there's 25 million company reports in the US. Only 7,000 of those, or 0.01% of those, are public companies. Then you have your large private, medium companies, and then your SMEs, which represent 99% of the database. Now, if we look at a small local company in your city, the likelihood is it's going to be somewhere between 1 and 5. Does that represent the company in total? Probably doesn't. But if there are 5 companies saying, hey, these guys pay me late, the likelihood is they're late payers.
Right.
I'm happy to elaborate on that subject if our audience wants us to, Nathan.
I'm not seeing any new questions on that right away, so I think I'm gonna have you keep going, and as these other questions come along, I'm trying to aggregate them and get similar questions together, specifically on what's going on here.
So we've talked about the summary. This is pretty much the information that's used to make a quick decision. Now, in the cases where there are exceptions, you're able to drill down into the report. So first of all, let's talk about financials. You can click on the financials tab and it'll give you all of the key areas, and that you can drill down. You can also then get the comparisons. I didn't pick a good example there. You can also highlight over any of the, let's do that, there's a better one. You can see how that changes annually. For public companies, we have the annual and the interim values. For a private company, obviously, there are no financials in the US. The next tab I want to talk about is the group structure. So what we have here is the corporate hierarchy. And this is essentially the family tree of the organization. Now, what I love about the Creditsafe service in particular is we give you the score and the ratings of the other companies in the group, and they're all hyperlinked. So you can click on any one of these companies and it'll take you through to that report. So this is hierarchical, so you can see all of these are going to be subsidiary of the Microsoft group. We have a tab that says, I'll start again, possible links.
Mark, before you jump into possible links, I've noticed a bunch of questions here on this one on specific. Folks are saying, hey, Microsoft has a lot of it either has a payment trend that doesn't look so great, or it has a bunch of past due, severely past due, so on and so forth. Can you explain maybe a little bit more on a big company like this, what that actually means? And, we're looking at Microsoft. Should folks not be doing business with them based on these or all of that? I think that'll kind of encompass all the questions that I've got here. I've got 4 or 5 of them.
So if we look at DBT, we've rated this, we've got a green below, but it's not as bright green as this. So there is, they do pay past due. 17 days past due for, a company like Microsoft isn't particularly bad. The the interesting thing here, sorry, I was just trying to think about my answer. The scoring methodology for the US database. So we have 3 scorecards. We have public companies. So I think on the Microsoft report, we had about $1 million a trade, but their revenue is about 100 billion plus maybe. So that is very small percentage of their overall revenue. So on the large private companies, financials will have a bigger weighting in the rating methodology. Now, if we were looking at a smaller company with a trade, first of all, we don't have financials. We only have the trade to go off. So the trade on a smaller company will have a much bigger impact than on a larger company. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think some of it was just as well. I mean, I'm seeing just kind of rereading all of these, like right now you got the payment trend indicator at the top, looking at the red, you've got a ton, when we were looking at their payment sections of severely overdue and things like that, that there were a bunch of those. Is this, how do people interpret that when they're looking at that? You've got the severely past due and stuff like that. With such a big company, how can they interpret that to get a good idea of what's going on?
Again, I think the power of trade payment information diminishes as the company becomes larger. So for Microsoft, if I'm a company offering credit to Microsoft, I would probably think, okay, in my mind, I'm going to get paid 17 days beyond terms. So if I'm invoicing them on a net 30, there's going to be 47 days. That isn't really a major issue. I might change my payment terms to net 15 and get paid 32 days. So for the larger companies, I don't think the payment behavior is particularly relevant with Microsoft. I would use that as a guidance. If we were looking at a much smaller company, then the relevance of this information becomes far more interesting.
Okay. And then there's a bunch of questions here. Actually, I have like 4 or 5 again about this of what about the different divisions or branches or what have you of a particular company? Do they each get their own rating, or is it just one big rating, or how does that go?
One of the challenges with US data is identifying locations of a company, whether they're a separate legal entity or part of the same company. So you'll notice if I scroll down, what we have the trade payment information for companies that we've identified for this particular legal entity. Then we've summarized the trade payment data for the Microsoft group. If we go back to the group tab, we're going to click on that. So all the companies listed in the group structures are separate legal entities. And then you have the ability to view the branches or locations of Microsoft. So there's going to be hundreds of different locations listed here. So one of the biggest challenges that any of the reference companies have, and none of us get it absolutely perfect, is establishing whether this is part of the same legal entity. Is it a branch? Is there a location of this particular company? Or is it a separate legal entity? And one of the ways to do that is to look at the corporate record. So within the company details tab, you have a digitized version of the SOS filing. So if there's an SOS file in here, you probably determine it's a separate legal entity. But it can be challenging, that particular issue.
All right, I think we can keep rolling on here. There's some other questions, but I know you're going to get to some of this stuff later, so I'm going to let those sit for just a second. I think you can keep rolling.
Perfect. So actually on a similar theme, so we have the group structure, which says these companies are related. Then we have what we call possible links. Now these are reports, separate reports, the share attributes. Again, we're looking at a result that's going to be skewed simply by the size of Microsoft. But you can see there's 42 other companies in our database that share the same name, 308 companies that share the same web address. They could all be different legal entities. In fact, if I click on that 308, it'll give me a list of all the other companies that meet that criteria. Looking at I wish I'd picked a different example for this particular illustration, but this is a fantastic tool for skip tracing. A lot of companies, when they fail, they might set up a company with a similar name, but keep the same web address. It's good for identifying past failures and getting a bigger sense of information. I am conscious of time, and I do want to take some questions at the end, Nathan. So I'm going to just fly through the last couple of sections. We have the officer information, which details the formal officers of a company. You can simply click on any one of these companies. So let's take a look at this lady or gentleman. We can then also tell you whether they're a director of any other or officer of any of the other companies. So you'll see the other directorships here. I'm going to go back to the company report. And then one of the high-level subjects we talked about was legal filings. Now, what we detail here is a summary, suits and judgments, liens, and UCCs. We detail whether the company's been bankrupt, when any of its branches have been bankrupt, or the group, the number of judgments. Again, this company, branches, and group, and same for suits, liens, UCCs. And you're able then, we list the most recent filings, so you can simply click on any one of these, and it's going to give you the detail then of those particular filings. We've touched upon payment data, but what you can do here is drill down further into the payment information. There's lots of different things that various credit managers are interested in. So you might want to see the highest dollar value that was severely past due, for example, or their recent high credit. We can break down the trade payment information by industry. So we can see that the majority of Microsoft's trade lines coming from this information and communication section. As we go down, there's various other breakdowns. I do want to just very quickly, Nathan, I'm going to switch companies and
you go right ahead. Yeah, and while you're doing that, folks, there's a lot of questions coming in, and I'm trying. This is way more than we normally have. Actually, we normally get 3 or 4 questions at a time, and I have about 40 sitting here right now. So I just want to let you know some of these questions are very specific, and I don't know that Mark's going to have time to go over all of them. However, Mark has, I was going to just put this at the end, but I'll say it now. Mark has extended an offer, and we will put it in the follow-up email to have a 15-minute sit down with him one-on-one. With your company and him to talk through this, to answer any questions you might have about specifics that you need or you're looking for with the credit reports you're pulling and all of that, to go over your portfolio, to go over your credit report, whatever. We have that available, and I'll put the information on how to do that on the follow-up email. So if we don't get to your question, please know that I'm not trying to ignore you. We're not trying to ignore you at all. We're just conscious of time and of the questions that have multiple people asking a similar question, trying to answer those first. And then these more specific questions, we're happy to answer on a more personalized basis here in the next week or so.
Yeah, just to build off what Nathan's saying, I'm happy to sit down with anyone. We can set up a 15-minute call and answer the specific questions. There's one last thing that I'd just like to show, Nathan. This is a US private company. I'm going to use our own credit report, Creditsafe USA. So we're a private company. We don't file financials. You'll notice that within the drill down tabs, there is no financials tool here, but the report essentially looks the same. The difference between the Microsoft, which is its own holding company, is we have a holding company, and they're drill downable from here. There are no key financials, and this is typical of a company of our size. So we've got 20 trade lines for ourselves. I'm glad that we're paying everyone on time, which is nice as a credit reference.
Be embarrassing if we brought this up and we didn't.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to do is show you. So even for a private company, if we click on group, this will give us our corporate tree if a company's part of a corporate tree. And let's take a look very quickly at our US subsidiary, UK subsidiary, should I say. So this is going to take me to the UK report. And obviously in the UK, companies do have to file financials, so they will be available here. And then we have the key financials for the UK legal entity. As I mentioned, this was designed to be touch upon the high level areas of a credit report. The credit reports can change depending on jurisdiction, company size. It's a very in-depth topic that we could probably spend a whole week studying rather than in a 1 hour webinar. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, Nathan. I hope I've covered everything, but please let me know if there's certain questions.
We have a great group here that is interacting like crazy. So I'm sure if you didn't, we will get to them in the questions or they will ask it. We do have a couple of questions. I just want to let you folks know we have a bunch of questions here, probably 5 or 6, about something international outside of the US. We have specific webinars on that, and we will be continuing to have those. So rather than putting a lot of time right now into the differences between the different reporting and the scoring systems and all that type of stuff, I'm going to direct you to our other webinars that'll be coming up to learn about that, or to schedule a time with Mark. I don't know if you've been able to tell by the accent, but he's not originally from America, so he can definitely speak to that as well on the international side of things with that. So either set up a time there, or be involved in some of the later webinars that we have coming up for internationals, what's going on in different regions of the world. So there's that one. Mark, there's been a few questions around the idea of what is the derogatory legal filings that they should be paying attention to. How often are they updated? What should they be paying attention to? How does that affect a score? There's been a lot of questions around that derogatory legal filings, whether it's tax liens, bankruptcy, so on and so forth. Do you want to give a little more information there?
Yeah, so at our core, what we're trying to predict is whether this company is going to pay you. And there are a couple of things that are relevant in that particular scenario. So is the company going to be around? Are they going to be here in 12 months? But also, are there any payment problems? So the derogatory legal, they're ranked in order of severity. So the most severe is bankruptcy. If a company is bankrupt, there are companies, and we've done a webinar on this, Nathan, what is bankruptcy, but the bankruptcy isn't always the death of a company. It can be as re-emergence, but that's probably the most significant negative event that can happen to a company. Then you have tax liens. So this indicates a payment problem with local taxes. Judgments. Now, a judgment is, a company's being sued for whatever reason. That could indicate a particular, if a company's got revenue of $1 million and they've been sued for 5 million, that could have a severe impact on his ability to continue trading.
Okay. Good stuff here. I'm just trying to go through all of these here. And
just a little bit more on the legal filings, Nathan, as it came to mind. So the presence of a legal filing does stick around on a credit report. If a company becomes bankrupt and emerges from bankruptcy, the idea that company's been bankrupt is still relevant to, they come out of bankruptcy, it's still going to have a negative impact on its credit report 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, 12 months later. But it's sort of time weighted. So the longer that goes since the event, the less of an impact that's going to have. So you'll notice on the tax liens, you have active and released as well. In this particular instance for Creditsafe USA, our revenues are about 25 million annually, and we've got 12K of legal filings. It's not it's not enormously problem. It's not an enormous problem in this particular scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got several questions around the idea of how can somebody have, say, a credit score that is high, DBT that is low, but also a very low credit limit, a projected credit limit that we recommend. Or, kind of in the other ways, how could somebody have like a mid-level credit score, a high DBT, but a high credit limit extension to extend?
So the whole discussion around risk score, DBT, and credit limit is another subject that we're not going to do justice in a 1 hour webinar. But as I mentioned, it's an off-the-shelf scoring system that is designed for the masses, and we can calibrate these scores to be specific to a particular company. But in general, so what you have, the biggest, I should add, the risk score is a proprietary rating system for Creditsafe. And it's a bit like the KFC secret recipe. You can guess the key ingredients, but we're not going to give you the exact measurements. But the biggest driver in US credit scores is going to be the payment behavior.
Right.
So what you'll see is a company with a high score is going to have a low DBT, and vice versa. So if they have a high DBT, they'll generally have a low score, unless they're a very large organization. What you will see that will differ is the credit limit. So the credit limit takes into consideration the annual revenues or estimated annual revenues and the availability and historic trade payment information. So if we look at a company that has had $10 million of trade versus a company that's had $10,000 of trade, the company with a 10 million is more likely to have a bigger credit limit than the company with a smaller historic trade.
Great stuff there. A lot of questions on how often everything is updated.
That's
so of the various different
and
forms.
Yeah. Probably the question that comes up the most when speaking with everyone. So to answer the question, the database is constantly being updated. All of the thousands of data items that we integrate or aggregate are released on varying frequencies. So let's take annual financials, for example. The company will file their financials annually, but companies don't file them all on the same day. So in our industry, it's kind of first past the post. There's a race between all of our competitors to get that information and on a report as quickly as we can. So our data team has a huge investment in getting the information from its source onto the report as quickly as we can. So there are data sources that are updated monthly, weekly, daily. Bankruptcy, for example, is a data item that's released daily. As soon as we get that information, we want to put it on our report. So the information is constantly being updated is the answer. The frequency in which the data is available will differ. So annual returns, by definition, are going to be annual. Bankruptcy, daily. It depends on what data item we're talking about.
Okay. So that looks great in there. We've got quite a few other things just coming in here. I'm trying to make sure I've got the most asked questions here. What about private companies? We talked about public companies versus private companies. Where is the majority of that data coming from, and how is it verified? That's a question a lot of people are asking, like, how is that type of data verified, or where is it coming from when we're providing this information?
So at the start of the discussion, we talked about some of the data sources. So we have the Secretary of State filing, which basically says the company exists. That is the backbone of the data. There are companies that don't exist on the SOS, but do have a credit report and vice versa. So we start there. And then what we try to do is furnish that report. So we'll look at all of these other data sources. So if we take the example today, I'm going to quit my job, or I've been fired for doing such a bad job on this webinar. I'm going to start my own business. I go out, I register at the Secretary of State. That's the first data we take. Then I start getting credit from lots of different providers, Staples and the other companies. Then we start getting trade payment data on that particular company. I may not pay a particular company or not pay the Pennsylvania tax. Then I get a tax lien. So it's kind of organic, and it happens over time. So we start with a backbone, and we furnish that piece of information. Part of the data processing team's job is to make sure that the data is accurate. We have thousands of companies that will challenge some of the data items, and that keeps the database clean. But it goes through a rigorous QC process to test the accuracy of that data. The overall goal of any piece of data that we incorporate in the report is to give a true reflection of how we believe that company is going to pay its suppliers in the next 12 months.
Great. We had a couple of folks asking, actually more than a couple of folks asking about the payment trend icon up at the top. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because for Microsoft, it was showing red, for here it's showing, for Creditsafe here, it's showing green. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, so the definition I've highlighted, anything on the report, you can hover over and it gives you the pop-up. So this indicates whether the DBT is getting better, i.e. decreasing, or getting worse, increasing. So the DBT runs from 0 to 120. I thought there was a metric on here, there's not. The higher the DBT, the longer it takes to pay. So with Creditsafe, our DBT is getting lower. With Microsoft, it's getting higher.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not that they pay badly necessarily. It's just that it's gotten worse in the last cycle versus better.
It could have been in
cycle.
Microsoft's particular instance. They've gone from 16 to 17.
Right. Right. So it's just a quick indicator, but it doesn't show the full story. And there's always a way to drill down and get more information.
Yeah.
Great. The last question I'm going to have, there's two more questions that seem to be a lot of stuff here. One of them is just going to be a softball for you that I'm sure you're going to love to check on is how does our data compare to other folks out there that do the same type of job? So I'll ask that first, and then we'll go to these other questions.
I really wish I had a better answer for this question because it's something that I get asked daily. I have a biased belief that our data is very competitive in the US. The way I would suggest, or anyone who needs to make a decision as to what credit provider they need to make, needs to do two things. They need to make sure that the company has the coverage, but also once they have the coverage, has the depth of data. Now, there's a way of doing that. Any of the reference agencies should be able to provide you with a data health check. You can go to company A or company B or company C, in our case, Creditsafe, and say, right, here's 50 companies. Give me the data that you've got. Let me make a decision as to whether it's better than the incumbent. And that's how I would answer that question is, don't take my word for it. Let us show you how what you think.
Absolutely. And again, we've got that time for them to sit down with you or if they're already working with an account rep or something like that, that they can definitely do that. There's another question that's come up in various forms here that I want to make sure that we ask about or we answer about is for credit that is going on within their own company. Are they able to see what companies are reporting on them? And if they see something wrong, somebody's reporting something incorrectly, how are they able to challenge that, do something about that? Or is it just, that's what that person said and that's the way it's going to be?
The data is reported anonymously and confidentially. However, if you look at a report, the rating agency has an obligation to qualify that data. So if you look at the trade payment data, it won't, and it's designed in such a way. I'm going to share my screen, Nathan, just so you can re-see that information. It's designed in a way to hide out who the individual provider is, because if that wasn't the case, they probably wouldn't report that data. But you can then sort of get a sense who you think it is. What will happen then is if you phone Creditsafe and say, hey, you're showing this information, showing I'm paying late, I don't think it's right, we'll then call the provider, question that with them, and then raise a query then.
There you go. All right. So for those folks that had those type of questions, there's your answer. I'm going to sneak in one more here, Mark, before we have to start wrapping up here. A lot of folks have asked something about early stage companies, whether they're startups, they're in their seed rounds of funding, early rounds of funding, what have you. You just want to talk about that a little bit? The questions are all over the map on that, but I know that that's something you can just kind of cover in a general answer.
Yeah, I wish I had a slide prepared because so the US database, there's about 60 million records in our database, of which we give a score to around 25 million. Of that 25 million, there's about 12 million what we call interesting companies, the ones that are trading on a day-to-day basis. But the database looks like this. So at the top, you have the large public companies. As I mentioned, is 0.01%, about 7,000 in total. And then 99% of the companies are small, medium companies. And that's where the coverage element that I mentioned earlier, if you're making a decision, who are you going to use, company A or company B? That's the test, is these small companies or newly funded companies. That's where the data can be particularly problematic. And on the slide I'm referring to, I know I'm referring to something that I don't have a visual. The data quality degrades as we go down this pyramid. So at the very bottom, the most challenging piece are the companies that you mentioned there, Nathan, the newly formed companies, because there's just not a wealth of information about them. Yeah, I think I've answered that question. I'm not.
I think you're good there. Yep. There's a few of these here that I'm trying to send answers to folks. Once again, folks, there's a ton of questions here. We're going to have to kind of start tailing this off so that we respect your time. And these questions are great. We will keep a track of these, and we will either get you an answer to them via email, or when you get the follow-up email, you will have a chance. There'll be a link there to talk to Mark. And set up a meeting, 15-minute meeting with him, one-on-one to answer your specific questions, because some of these are really specific to specific industries or your company or something like that. So please know, we've talked a lot about our trade payment data information. If you go to our website, and some of you have even asked, how do we submit this? How do we do this? All that type of stuff. There's a whole section on that on our website. I will include the link in the follow-up email so that you have a direct link right to that and working through that and seeing how that all works and all of that. But we do want to say that to you. And just to clarify some of the stuff that we asked in the beginning, Mark, most of the folks are looking, not surprisingly, at what the DBT is. They want to get that's one of the big questions they're asking. How quickly are they going to get paid? A lot of them are asking, how likely am I going to get repaid? Obviously, they want their money back. And then a lot of them are asking, kind of that starting point is what I'm seeing from a lot of these folks, of that credit limit. So especially with new companies, they don't have a history with them. What are we safe possibly extending to them from credit?
There was one question that caught my eye from Cynthia Jones. Credit limit versus contract limit. What does the latter mean? So the credit limit is particularly when you're the supplier and the company's the debtor. The contract limit is the reverse. So let's say you've approached a company to build a building for you. Do they have the ability to deliver the said contract? So a one-man construction firm might not be able to facilitate a $50 million construction job.
There you go. So a great answer there. And I've had a couple of folks here right at the end and say, can we get a recording? Can we get this? I promise you folks, within the next 2 business days, you will have a follow-up email that will be in the email that you registered for this webinar with, that will come to you, that will have a link to the recording. It will have a link to our new business credit report page. It's got all of our content about this, all sorts of explanations. It's going to have a lot of the stuff that Mark said and more. And it will link out to even more specifics about some of these things. So some of your questions will be answered there. I will have a link to our trade payment data program.
One more question.
Go for it. A
question raised by Michaela. Apologies for the pronunciation. Budova. For European companies, it looks like you have financial numbers from 2019. I often see data from 2018. In the US, you have 2020. So this is because of the filing regulations in each country. So for public companies, the reason we have 2020 accounts is they file on a quarterly basis. If we take the UK, for example, you typically have 18 months after the period to file your financials. So typically in the UK, the financial year runs April to April. So April 2019, you will have pretty much 18 months after April 2020 to submit accounts for that. That's why it's going to be 18.
Okay, well, there we go. Folks, like I said, there's going to be all that information in the email, as well as the link to set up a meeting with Mark. so that he, has that all set up and everything can be taken care of in that regard. So we want to thank all of you for being here today, for joining with us. And these are only as good as you guys are as having the information discussed and talking back and forth. So thank you so much for all your questions. I apologize that we couldn't get to every last one, but I truly appreciate you being involved with us. And know that we do these every week. We have anywhere from 1 to 3 webinars every single week. You can always check those out at creditsafe.com/webinars. Our next one I'm very excited about. I'll be welcoming Mary Shores of Shores Communications to the webinar, and she will be discussing the communications of collections. So increasing your repayment rates, helping to get those collections covered, taking care of all that, and helping to even possibly prevent you from getting into those collection setups. So I just want to let you know, folks, that that's going on, and be on the lookout for that follow-up email. Once again, Mark, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you on here. I always have a great time with you, and I always learn a bunch, which I think our audience has too. And to you, our audience, thank you so much for being here with us, and we will see you next time. Have a great one, everybody.
Thank you.